and good evening again. This is Cassandra Williams, aka Coach Kiss, and I welcome you to yet another episode of the Kiss Corner. It has indeed been my pleasure to come on and share with you guys. So I thank you for rocking out with me. If this is your first time joining me, again, welcome. The Kids Corner has been created as a safe space um, for women like me who have come out of toxic relationships, personal relationships, and are now ready to put in the work necessary, right? To elevate to a higher version of yourself. And so that, in essence, is the cornerstone of the Kiss Corner. So I welcome you again. If you are watching on Facebook, please go into those comments, give me a love, give me those likes, give me those cares, and feel free to share. And if you are watching on YouTube through our Empowered Voices Network with Miss PJ Jones, hey PJ, please again go ahead, like, subscribe, share, and join us, please, in the comment. We'd love to get your feedback and for you to, engage this evening. So, without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Um, and so, if you've been with me from the beginning of the month, and I know this is just our second Sunday, for those of you who didn't know, you're right, we're moving. We had to move the date to Sundays for right now. So, from Thursdays to Sundays, 6 Eastern Standard Time, right? And so you may already know if you were with me last week, and if not, then you're finding out now that July is really personal in a lot of ways, more than I even realized initially, actually. And so I'm going into a series this month that I'm calling I'm Evolving Past My Mother's Pain, but Never Without Honoring Her Power. And so tonight's episode specifically is titled The Power in Her Quiet, right? Um, so we're talking about the silence our mothers held, not just from the hush of discipline, right? Or the avoidance of drama, but the kind of silence that became a coping mechanism, a shield, and a survival tool, right? And so we're asking this evening, what did that quiet cost her? And what are we carrying it from it today? Right? I'm learning a lot about myself through this time that I'm here with my mom, um, and being in a different point in my life and she in hers. I'm totally seeing our dynamic in a beautifully different way. And so, in that, I'm learning more about myself, and essentially, I'm actually learning a lot more about my mom, but from a totally different perspective because I'm seeing her as more than just my mother, right? And so, all of that to say that there is a moment in every adult daughter's life, I believe, where you stop seeing your mother as just mama and you start seeing her as a woman. And I think being in as much proximity as we are now, I definitely get to see up close firsthand her more as the woman and not just as my mama, right? She's not a superhero. She's not a saint and she's not a statue, right? But she's full, she's layered, sometimes broken, sometimes healing, right? And so all of that is what makes her, as well as many of us, all of us, right, women. And if you're a man out there watching, it makes you a man. It makes us human, right? Because nobody's perfect. And so what happens when there's a shift that begins to take place? And what I've noticed is that it changes the way you interpret everything that she did and everything that she didn't do. So you start to look at the silence differently because I'm talking about the power in her quiet, the hesitation, the emotional withdrawal sometimes, the way she avoided certain conversations. And to be perfectly honest, will still tend to avoid certain conversations. The way she'll let some things slide or never followed up. And you stop asking, why didn't she just say something? And I do remember thinking that a lot when I was a kid as I started growing older, right? Teenager, you think you know it all. Well, why did she just say this? Why don't she just do that? Right. Um, and so you start moving from that place to what did life teach her about what happened when she did say something? And so that's a much broader, a much deeper question, right? Because oftentimes, and I know this from my own experience of being a mother as well, right? We're only allowed to wear one face, and that's strong, capable, always composed, and always sacrificing. But under that title, right, who's really there? There's a woman who has been carrying expectations since she was a girl, a woman who had dreams before diapers, a woman who had disappointments she never got to grieve properly, and a woman who might not have been allowed to speak her truth, so she just stopped trying. And we owe it to our moms, our mom figures, to consider those aspects of their lives in how they play a part in ours, right? And so when we don't give ourselves space to see the woman in our mothers and mother figures, we miss the why behind the quiet. I'm going to say that again. When we don't give ourselves space to see the woman in our mothers and mother figures, we miss the why behind the quiet. So I remember my mom was sitting in her recliner, as she often does when she comes home, especially when she comes home from work. And she often will sit and scroll, through her social media, like many of us do. But there are times where I can tell she's just unwinding, from the day and just diving into stuff just to take your mind away from a hard day and a long day, right? And there's a difference between that and when she's in the process of checking out, I'll say. Maybe not even checking out, but avoiding, right? And so we had a conversation. I think I mentioned it to you guys last week. That was regarding my finances and what have you, and how it was. She was receiving phone calls about it on her part, and had to clarify what all of that meant and what was happening. And we went from that, once we got everything cleared up in terms of her understanding, and we started talking. And I was saying to her, like, Mom, sometimes I notice like you don't have as hard a time speaking to me as you do with other people. And when I say that, I mean basically just like how can I say it? Like she'll feel more comfortable um to say something to me than like my brothers, perhaps, or something like that, right? And so as we're having this conversation, she kind of acknowledged it, but I'm like, but in as much as you can say something to me, you can say something to them, and what have you. Thank you, Miss Sharon. Um, Sorry guys, trying to make sure you all can hear me. It might just be my voice too, because I got a tooth issue going on over here. So let me make sure I'm speaking loudly. Thank you, Miss Sharon. And so as she and I are talking, um, and I think I told you all, she was like, just be patient with me. And we went into this piece for a moment. That was like, but it's okay to speak your piece, right? It's okay to state how you feel. It's okay to say that you didn't like something and that you need something else to happen. And here's what I prefer, right? Here's what I need. And her thing was kind of like, well, but I don't like, I don't want to start any trouble. I don't want to start any issues. I don't want to have a confrontation. I don't want, basically, she was kind of going into like, I don't want to disappoint people. I don't want people to be disappointed in me. I don't want to be disappointed in them. And so it's easier to just kind of keep things to myself. And so as we kind of stepped away from that a little bit because she needed a break, and it wasn't confrontational or anything, it was just us speaking. And because I knew that I had brought up an issue that she didn't necessarily want to face beyond our discussion about it, um she just went into scrolling mode, right? And that's when I knew that I saw her again, not just as my mom, but as a woman who was choosing stillness over conflict, choosing quiet over confrontation, and choosing an emotional distance because she was taught that silence equals safety. So, you know, without realizing it, you begin to see that you can grow up around people, around your mom, around anyone else who can have a tendency at times, and I had to start noticing this about myself as well, that you can disappear in plain sight, right? And not necessarily physically, but emotionally, energetically, spiritually, like you just you just bring it in. And that type of silence, it begins to tell you everything even though nothing in the moment is being said. The identity of being a mom was expected for her, I think, to cancel out everything else, right? Her pain, I believe, at times was suppressed, and this is in retrospect, right? Her needs postponed, her past unprocessed, and her silence praised. And I think as Black women, that strikes a chord, right? When your silence is praised, as long as it keeps peace. And so the silence then doesn't mean and didn't mean that she doesn't or didn't have anything to say. And again, this is how I start now reflecting this back to my own actions. It just meant that there was never a space created for her to say the things that she needed and wanted to say. And after a while, perhaps, she simply just stopped trying. I've done it. And especially as women of color, we may tend to call it strength, or it may be pushed upon us to be called as strong women, right? But in truth, it's more often survival. And you can do but so much living your life continuously through survival mode. So tonight, I need you to know that I am not here in any way to shame my mother's quiet. I'm here to honor it, to understand it, and to decide what I will do differently because of it. Because while I may have inherited her silence, I also inherited her wisdom, her softness, and her strength, her genuine strength. And now it's my turn to choose what gets passed on next. So, our mothers, especially Black mamas, right? Black moms have carried generations of weight without opening their mouths to complain. She raised babies, held down jobs, endured mental and emotional labor that would have crushed a lot of other people. And she did it all with her lips pressed shut and her head held high in many regards. Why? Because she was taught that to speak up was to be a problem, as many women often are, right? To cry is weakness, especially to do it in front of others. I'm sure there were many tears shed in a bathroom or in the car and things like that, but not in front of us. How do I know? Right. And to ask for help, especially again as a Black mama, is often culturally seen as failure when really it's not. Right. We talk about the village being necessary. And then when you go to it, people start looking at you crazy sometimes, not always. But again, there's this duality of, you know, when you're trying to be strong and when is that strength really seen more as weakness. And it's a burden that we carry, to be perfectly honest. So, that phrase, that strong Black woman, it gets tossed around like a badge of honor, but we don't talk enough about the burden, again, that comes with that title. That strength we admire, it was forged in silence, in suppressed emotions, and in untreated grief, and in the constant pressure to perform for everybody else's comfort. I mean, think about it. How many of our mothers apologized after snapping? Or how many ever said, that hurt me, or I'm struggling, or I need space? Instead, it was quiet strength. It was get it done and don't complain. But here's the truth we don't say out loud, right? Silence is not always strength. Sometimes it's survival, sometimes it's fear, and sometimes it's just sheer exhaustion. And most often, I've come to find it's a combination of all. So let's go a little bit deeper. We often lump all silence together, right? But there is a difference between quiet for peace and quiet for avoidance. There's silence that's wise, right? When you're observing, you're reflecting, and you're choosing your moment. And it happens. That's the kind of silence that says, let me gather myself. Let me see what's going on. Let me check out the scene, right? That's discernment and your level of maturity beginning to kick in. But then there's the silence that turns into a pattern. When choosing your battles becomes avoiding all of them. When walking away becomes never going back. When sitting with your feelings becomes shoving them under the rug and walking around them like furniture. And that kind of silence becomes self erasure. And that's where we don't want to go. I think my mom learned early on that speaking up only led to conflict. I definitely could see that at times with my dad, to be perfectly honest. So she stayed quiet. She avoided confrontation, at least in as much as possible. And she created peace around her by sacrificing peace within her in as much as she could. And I see that that's a role that I have definitely played in my life. She didn't say necessarily when she was tired. She didn't say necessarily when she needed help. She didn't say necessarily when she felt disrespected. But yet she did say it when she got tired and the situations in life began to present themselves for her to be able to show by her actions that enough was enough. So she may not have said it loud, but she showed it loud. And now I realize that again, I inherited that kind of quiet, not because she told me to, but because I watched her model it. I swallowed words to keep peace in my relationship. I delayed hard conversations. I waited for things to magically fix themselves and then got mad when they didn't. That's not strength. And that's what I'm having to come to the realization of. It's not strength. That's survival mode on repeat. And here's the part that really gets me is that my mom may never admit that her silence cost her something, right? But I feel it in how I process pain and how I hold things in and how I sometimes vanish behind a smile. And I promise you, I've been working on these things, not just alone, right? But through therapy, through support. And so I'm not where I was, but I'm still a work in progress. So I'm going to let you jump in here. Go ahead in those comments, type in silent. If you've ever been, if you've ever confused silence for peace, and type learned if you picked up that silence by watching someone you love, right? And maybe it's both. I think it is for me, right? Silence if you confuse all silence for peace, and then learned if you've picked up a certain level of silence in your own life by watching someone else. So let's sit with this together for a moment. What did your mom perhaps not say that you still remember? Maybe it was never hearing I'm sorry. Maybe it was the way she avoided eye contact during hard conversations. That's me. That is me. Maybe it was the hug that she withheld instead of giving. And again, I'm not saying that this is a list of all the things that my mom did, but I'm just listing some things in general and just having you reflect on where do you fit, if anything, in this list, right? Maybe she never told you she was proud, even if you knew it deep down. And so again, share in the comments if you care to do so, because this is, you may not necessarily want to share that publicly, and that's okay. But I need you to take the moment to think about it, right? To ponder it. Because again, please be clear that we're letting this be the moment where we speak for her and not against her, where we honor what she held in and we release what we no longer need to carry. So here's what I know now. My mom's quiet was and is her shield. But my voice, that's my sword. Her silence may have saved her, but my expression will heal me. It's not disrespectful to say that didn't work for me. It's not dishonorable to say I need something different. It's not ungrateful to say I'm choosing another way. I honor her stillness, but I will not inherit suppression, nor do I plan to pass that along to my children. I want my daughters and my son to know we speak, we feel, we name our needs, we ask for clarity, we honor boundaries because healing is noisy. Healing is noisy. So I want us to be able to share and say this together. Or you can even write it in the chat. Her quiet protected her. My voice will protect me. Her quiet protected her, but my voice will protect me. And so, as we begin to come to a close this evening, I want to close with what I'm going to call some truth tellers, right? Say them out loud or type in one in the chat that really resonates with you. I will speak the truths my mother couldn't. Her silence taught me to survive. My voice will teach me to thrive. Peace is not the absence of words, it's the presence of truth. I can honor her strength without repeating her silence. And finally, I give myself permission to be heard. I give myself permission to be heard because that is honoring you. That's honoring her. That's honoring life because we can give ourselves, we don't have to wait for anybody to tell us it's okay. You give yourself permission to speak and to speak boldly. We can't do anything about how people may interpret what we're saying, but we all have a right to be heard, right? The right to say what we need to say. And so you give yourself permission to be heard because you were not born to suffer in silence. So I hope that this has resonated with you and someone that you can share with. Before I close out this evening, I want to thank my partner at Empowered Voices Finding Strength in Survivors on YouTube, because this platform is creating a space for stories that were silenced for far too long and amplifying the journeys of those who were learning to speak up, heal out loud, and reclaim their narratives. If tonight's message touched you, if you've seen your own story in your mother's silence, I invite you to support the work that we are doing. You can donate at the link scrolling across your screen. And if you're on Facebook, the link is also pinned in the comments below. Every dollar will help to uplift the voices of women who are learning that silence may have protected them once, but now it's time to speak. Support empowered voices, support survivors, and support truth. So until next Sunday, as I always say, PJ starts laughing, same back time, same back station. I want you to speak clearly, rest gently, and release what you never should have had to carry. This is Cassandra Williams, aka Coach Kiss. Mwah. I thank you again for joining us for another evening of the Kiss Corner, and please continue to elevate along your healing journey. We will see you next week, Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you are watching this on Facebook and replay, please give us a hashtag replay. Give us those comments. Give us those likes, those loves, those cares, and share. On YouTube, give us those comments, the subscribes, the loves, the likes, the comments, everything. Because we know there's at least one soul that can benefit from the work that we do here. This is again Cassandra Williams, aka Coach Kiss, mwah, and this is the Kiss Corner. I'll see you next week. Same back time, same back station. Have a good night.